All right, the first of these three areas that we want to deal with is physical intimacy. And like I said, for each one of these areas, we want to hit kind of roadblocks, pitfalls, what does thriving look like, and what are some practical steps there, and just to kind of talk about this. And so yeah, let's jump into physical intimacy. And this is such a significant part of your marriage relationship is this physical intimacy, and some of that is sex life, and we'll talk about that a little bit, like it's sex life, but some of that is an arm around your spouse, or holding hands, or an affectionate touch as you walk by, or it's just pursuing each other and being conscious of pursuing each other physically. So yeah, Meg, jump in. Like, what are some roadblocks in just the physical nature of not just our relationship, but relationship in general?
Yeah, I know one of the things that I've seen just with having 3 little kiddos is that when you're in a stage of life where you have little ones around, oh wow, it just gets crazy, and it's hard energy-wise. It's hard feeling good about yourself-wise, and about the way that you look when we've had little ones, and you're constantly having little people pull on you all day. So sometimes you just want to say, I just want to sit in the corner and just be alone. But so I say busy stage of life is definitely a roadblock that I have experienced, as well as just general busyness. I think anybody could probably relate to that.
Yeah, and I think when you deal with, you're talking about physical, like the physical side of this, I think we all carry insecurities about the way we look, about the way we feel, about initiating things, initiating sex or initiating some physical touch, especially when that hasn't been there. That can be awkward. I think some of it is just the nature of the world that we live in, is that we all carry scars and baggage, whether that's from previous relationships, or whether that's from abuse, or whether that's from, whatever that might come from. We carry those things that I think can make this hard. They form a roadblock to step into physical intimacy. That's why it's like going back. Like, that's why in these particular areas, in all these areas, it's important for you. It's just in the idea of marriage maintenance to go back, hit an assessment, and then have this spot where you have confession and repentance and forgiveness and burial, so that there is a kind of reset, because there are times when we wound each other, and we need help there. Another thing that I think forms a roadblock here is that the church has done such a poor job of talking about this, and so kind of the premise is, or kind of the unspoken thing from the church is, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. When you're younger, when you're not married, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And then you're married, and it's supposed to be this glorious thing, and it's like,
there's no transition.
Right.
How does this happen?
Right. How does that happen? So you either kind of roll with that or you don't.
Right.
So I think that's some of it. So let's talk for a second about pitfalls. Like, so if we don't work on this, a pitfall is like you're setting a trap for yourself, that if you don't work on this, what happens? If you don't put some effort into this particular area of intimacy, where does it leave? And you don't have to speak for everybody. Where does it leave you vulnerable? And I'll talk about where it leaves me vulnerable, or men, kind of men and women.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I would say here is that if you do not address this, you are not only are you kind of leaving yourself vulnerable physically to just other relationships you might have, but also like you're leaving your spouse unguarded. You're leaving yourself unguarded. You're leaving your spouse unguarded, and that's the last thing we want to do with our spouses, is to leave them out there vulnerable, because they're going to find physical intimacy somewhere, and you want it to be with you and not with somebody else, or with a computer screen or whatever. You want them to have those.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'll jump in on the tail end of that. It's just like, look, the pitfalls. I mean, I think some of that is jumping off of what you're saying, is that a pitfall here is that you leave yourself open for this kind of lust and yearning and this like very physical, natural thing, with your body. I think some of it is the pitfalls. You set yourself up for isolation from each other. You're kind of isolated. You're kind of distant. I think what happens unintentionally, I think sometimes we kind of punish, not necessarily I'm sure we do this, but I think just kind of generally you kind of punish each other with withholding affection. And most of the time that's physical. I mean, just in our relationship, there's goodness, I don't remember what I was mad about, but there was something going on, and you knew it very well because, like, you haven't even touched me,
Right.
and for me, like, I'm a pretty physical person, and most of the time that's like a walk through the kitchen, squeeze you on the arm, kind of thing.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times we do that unconsciously.
Well, then, like you said, you open yourself up to bitterness and frustration. All of those things can just, dig that, or, yeah, put a wedge between you, and that's the last thing we want.
Sure. There's two things I think we really need to talk about here, physical intimacy, that I think are important, and you and I have talked about them quite a bit. One, so let's hit this kind of from my perspective, from a man's perspective, from a woman's perspective, particularly pertaining to physical intimacy. One thing I think is so important, men, for you in your marriage relationship, is for you to adjust your standard of beauty, for you to control your standard of beauty, for that to be your wife. Man, it should be that, man, that she is the standard for you, that, like, she is your jam, and her numbers and letters and all of that, is like, that's what you're looking for. And because, like, for me and Megan, if my standard of beauty is set by the culture, and it's some 6 foot tall, whatever, with a certain body type and certain letters and numbers and all that, and Megan doesn't hit that standard that the culture sets for us, then she's set up to never really hit that standard of beauty. But instead, if my standard is set by her, and it's like, look, this is what is beautiful, and nobody else really adds up to that, but she does, and that she's beautiful for me, and to me, that sets this up. Not even sets it up. That's so necessary. And the other step with that, from a man's side, from the husband's side of things, is like, I've seen this in my own life. Like, I've prayed for that for a decade. I'm not sure where that came from. I'm not sure who pushed me that way, but I've prayed. We've been married for 11 years, and so for at least 10 years of that, I've prayed that way, that God would change my perspectives, and that God would shape this. The other thing, especially the last few years, I feel like, is that I've been very conscious of being verbally affirming of
Right.
Megan's physical appearance. Of even to the point sometimes where it seems redundant, I would think, but Megan knows that, like, I love the way she looks. I love every square inch of her. I'm all the time joking around in front of the kids. It's like, Mama makes those yoga pants look good, or whatever it might be, some goofy thing. But it's like, and sometimes it's goofy like that, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's things that are shared in a quiet moment when nobody else is around, and she knows I think she's beautiful. So how does that play to you? Let's talk about that just for a second before we run out of time.
Right. I feel like that is the biggest thing in our relationship, just that verbal affirmation, because even though sometimes it might be, especially at the beginning, it might be hard to believe. You might think, I don't know, maybe is he just saying that? I don't know. But then, you know what? I start believing it, and it makes a world of difference. So if I could challenge you on any way, it would be to believe your husband when he says you're beautiful. Believe him when he says that you are looking good, and go with it, push away those feelings of insecurity and of doubt that your culture would have you believe, because, like we talked about earlier, your culture wants to exploit our insecurities and our vulnerabilities to make money. Okay, that's Satan working through our culture, and God would have nothing of that. God would not want you to believe that at all. And so I feel like that's the biggest. I love that. And sometimes it's hard, but I'm choosing to believe it, and it really makes a world of difference. So believe him when he says that, and guard him. Know that he is vulnerable physically, especially for men. That's a super hard thing. And so it is our job as their wives to help guard them. And part of that is to be there physically for them. And not only that, but, to affirm him as well, to affirm your husband, you look good. You are my standard, and not to be drooling over GQ magazine guys, let him be
saying I'm not GQ magazine.
I mean, you are. You look good. I like that hat. You're looking good today.
I understand.
So, I think that would be.
And I think some of it is again, coming back, like, this is so huge, a standard of beauty, where it's like, I genuinely love the way you look more today than I did when you were 20. And we talk about that. And for I think that seems unbelievable at some point, where it's like, I've had 3 kids and things are different, or whatever that might be. Even physically, like your body just is different. And so is mine. I haven't had 3 kids, but mine is too. That affected me. But still, like, legitimately saying, I love the way you look. I love the way you feel. I love all of that. And sometimes that is sex. Sometimes that's like your sex life, and that's what is shared personally and intimately. But sometimes that is right in the car, holding hands, or whatever that might be. And there's a whole realm here that is so important. And especially there's a lot of people that, like, that's kind of their love language. That's kind of the way that they talk. And I'm one of those people, a lot more than Megan is. So it's like, just in general, it's like that's the way that I express affection, and that's the way I hear affection. And a lot of times that is more of an arm around your wife sitting there watching a movie. Well, it's not all these other things. Sometimes it is, but it's both and. So anyway, put some work into the physical side of your relationships, physical intimacy, because, like I said, these all bleed over. Physical affects emotional and affects spiritual, but we can isolate this a little bit and say, hey, I'm going to put some work here and pursue each other. And you do that, and it will it'll pay off greatly in your relationship and in your intimacy.